After what has felt like 20 years of waiting and 20 years of frustration, the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series schedule has officially been released to the public. We've been getting some little glimpses here and there as to what exactly the schedule has been consisting of. We got confirmation about Iowa Speedway coming to the schedule. We've heard some rumors as to what the playoff tracks are going to be, some changes to the playoff schedule once again. But all of that has been put to rest because the schedule is officially here. And we're going to go through over its entirety. Very similar to the IndyCar video, we are going to go and dissect this NASCAR Cup Series schedule from the beginning to the end. I'll give my thoughts as we go through each and every part of the schedule. So we'll start off with the Busch Clash and we'll end it with the race at Phoenix. Now, before we get started on the video, there is a big glaring thing to mention about the schedule. I'll mention that before we go and dive deep into the schedule itself, but that is something I feel like needs to be mentioned before we start really critiquing the schedule and why certain races and dates are in their certain places. So, without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, so the number one thing that I definitely think does need to be mentioned is, of course, the Olympic break. And, to fans who are saying that, basically complaining about why is Daytona not the regular season finale? And if that's the case, why is it not on the 4th of July? Or why is Darlington out of the playoffs? Why is this and that? Well, let's address a little bit. We'll address those a little more individually as we go further and further on into the schedule. But everyone should know that's the main reason why the Olympic summer break kind of just throws the whole schedule off all over the place. There's really nothing NASCAR can do. It's NBC. They own the Olympics, and they value the Olympics more than they do the Cup Series. Understandably so. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon that happens every 4 years. I mean, how can you blame them? But that's the biggest reason why, and most of us already know this, that why the schedule has this kind of weird, I want to say, alignment, if you will. Like, let's just say this. I don't think next year Daytona is going to be the second to last race of the season. Let's just say that way. So with that preface out of the way, let's begin by going over the schedule. And I got the schedule right here on me. And like I did with the IndyCar schedule, I'm going to go one by one with each specific race and give my thoughts on it, if I have, any thoughts on it. So we'll start off here, have here the Clash at the Coliseum, Sunday, February 4th, 2 weeks before the Daytona 500. I don't have a problem with this. The Clash has been a mainstay. It's a spectacle. It's an exhibition race. It's a good way to get the season started for NASCAR. It's worked the past 2 years. I don't see why it wouldn't work in year 3. Then, of course, you got the duels, and then you got the Daytona 500. Sunday, February 18th. Nothing different there. First race of the season. It's the Daytona 500. Let's move on. Here comes the first controversial, I guess, change, if you will. And that is the Cup Series going to Atlanta the following week after Daytona. I always say this. If you have something that works, don't try to change it. And with NASCAR having 6 super speedways on the schedule, the way they had it spread out was pretty good. A super speedway about every 5 to 6 races. They make up a 6 of the schedule. Makes sense. So, why are we going to back-to-back super speedways? I mean, don't get me wrong. I know why they're doing it. They came out, they said, because they want basically, you came for the Daytona 500, you're basically going to get the same thing here with Atlanta. I get it. I get why they did it. But I'm personally not a fan of it. Again, back-to-back super speedways, because in a weird way, I feel like that could kind of go against you. Let's say you're watching NASCAR, and your first 2 races that you see are super speedway races. Well, what's to say that you're not going to expect that then for the entirety of the season? Throughout the entirety of NASCAR, we've known that, okay, this is just like kind of a one-off, if you will, and then the rest of the season goes away, keeps on going. Now, if you're a casual fan, you're thinking, hey, we're going to get this racing for the majority of the season, when in reality, they're not. So why they made this change, I know why. I'm not a fan of it. And, of course, people come out and say that, you're going to tear up equipment for back-to-back weeks. I'm personally not a fan of it. Again, I don't have a problem with more super speedway races, but to have back-to-back to open off the season makes absolutely no sense in my opinion. Then we go to the miniature West Coast swing because, of course, we don't have Auto Club anymore because NASCAR sold off the Auto Club land. So I don't even know if you can really call this a West Coast swing. It's only 2 races. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about it right here. Where Bristol is currently on the schedule, Sunday, March 17th. What is the definition of insanity, folks? Doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. I was one of the few people who was not a fan of the second concrete race coming back because fans have shown they don't want a second Bristol race on concrete. And to everyone who does, where were you when the first race was around? The answer, nowhere. So if this race only gets like 40,000 seats again and like maybe 2 million viewers watch, it kind of shows that the fans shouldn't be listened to. But anyways, here's what makes no sense to me. You go on the West Coast, Las Vegas and Phoenix. Then you go back to the East Coast for Bristol. Then you go back to the West Coast for COTA. What are we doing here? That's logistically and geographically makes absolutely no sense. You're going again from the West Coast, back-to-back weeks, then back to the East Coast, then back to the West Coast. Why not just swap COTA and Bristol? There, you got your West Coast swing right there, and you include a road course. That makes absolutely zero sense. Not to mention the placement on the schedule for the Bristol concrete race, the Food City 500, I believe it is. It's proven it doesn't work. It's constantly plagued by weather. Why does NASCAR and Bristol Motor Speedway think it's going to work again? Again, the definition of insanity here, folks, it's showing it. Now, maybe this race doesn't get rained out. But if it does, NASCAR's going to look like fools. Or Bristol Motor Speedway are going to look like fools because, again, for years and years, it has shown that date doesn't work. And they're going to try it again? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But don't get me wrong. I love that we're getting a second Bristol race back. Bristol's my favorite track on the schedule. But my biggest gripe here is why are we going to back-to-back West Coast races, then back to the East Coast, then going back to the West Coast? That makes absolutely no sense to me. But that's like my second big grievance here. Again, nothing really with the tracks, more just their placement. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. Now, I'm not a schedule maker. I'm not a TV maker or, anything like that. So I can't really say as to why. But you go back to the schedule here. Here we go. Richmond and Martinsville, back-to-back weekends again. So here's the timeline, folks. I'm not going to count Daytona and Atlanta because that's been done in the past, whatever, in terms of Daytona than Atlanta. So we're going to Las Vegas. Fair enough. Staying in the West Coast for Phoenix. Fair enough. Then we're going back to the East Coast for Bristol. Then we're going back to the West Coast for COTA. Then we're going back to the East Coast for Richmond. That makes absolutely no sense, in my opinion. It's like, just logistically, it makes no sense. In terms of their placements on the schedule, I mean, it's fine. This is pretty similar to how the tracks were pretty much since its entirety. COTA's been at the front end of the schedule, I believe, for the past 2 years now. So I'm not really surprised there. Oh, and listen to this, folks. Then we go back to the West Coast for Texas. So this one I'm gonna it's like, you know what, fine, whatever. I'm not gonna repeat my things again. I will say I am very, very happy that Texas is not a playoff race anymore. It doesn't deserve it. Texas is the worst track on the schedule. It is the one track that the next gen car, which has proven to be much better in 1.5 mile racing, it's the one track that sucks. I'm sorry, if the reason for your excitement for a race for Texas is because, oh, there's chaos, but the racing sucks, that tells me you have a bad track. Your track is terrible, or your car is terrible, but we know it's not the car, so it's Texas. I'm sorry. If I'm supposed to get excited because of crashes, at least Talladega, Daytona, I know I'm going to get pack racing, side-by-side action nonstop. It's not just, oh, the big one. If that's all I'm looking forward to at Texas is tire failures and crashes, then again, Texas doesn't even deserve to be on the schedule to begin with, but I digress. At least it's not an important race. Then we move on to Talladega. Again, normal placement on the schedule. Fair enough. Kind of the rest of the schedule here is fairly mundane. Dover, you got Kansas, Darlington, the All-Star race back in North Wilkesboro. I wish it was a points-paying race, but I think NASCAR wants to see what the Cup cars are going to do with a repaved short track. And of course, the short track package isn't very good, so they're probably going to wait a little bit to get that package right before they give a date to North Wilkesboro. But at least it's still on the schedule. At least it's the All-Star race. I'm happy to see it sticking around. Then you got the Coke 600. Then you go to Gateway, and then Sonoma, and then to kick off the NBC portion of the season is Iowa Speedway. Iowa Speedway back on the schedule. I very much enjoy this. I've loved watching Iowa races when the Truck Series was there, when the Xfinity Series was there, even when IndyCar's there. Iowa produces a lot of good races, and hey, there's even a couple drivers who believe so as well. A lot of drivers like this track as well. I have a couple grievances, however. And this isn't really with NASCAR, really. This is more to do with NBC. NBC to me makes no sense with how they dictate what races are on NBC, what races are on USA Network. Because why would you want your first race covering the sport for the season be on cable? That makes no sense. Again, someone tell me why in the comments below, and I'll try to understand. But to me, that makes no sense. Like, NASCAR back on NBC. It's not on the big NBC. What? What I'm saying, does that sound like it makes sense to any of you guys? Please tell me or not. But other than that, I'm fine with the Iowa date. I love the track. Like I said, my only real grievance is the fact that it's on the USA Network and not on main NBC for whatever reason. Other than that, I love it. New Hampshire, nothing really to change there. Nashville, nothing really to change there. The Chicago Street Course is back for the time being. Nothing really to change there. Pocono, nothing to change there. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway returns to the Oval for the Brickyard 400. And in fact, that is the final race before the 2-week summer break. I don't know. It's kind of I have the same feelings as Bristol Concrete. Fans say they wanted it back. Then why you keep the reason why? Same thing with Bristol Concrete. That it went away is because fans didn't want it. They didn't watch. They didn't show up. And then they lose it, and then they start clamoring for it back. Well, you have it back. It's kind of the same way with Bristol Concrete, the first one. In my opinion, I'd rather have gone to IRP or stayed on the road course because the racing has not been good. Now, you might be saying with the next gen car, and hopefully it's good, but I'd rather go to a new track in IRP, which is more NASCAR, which feels more of a NASCAR track, or stay on the road course. The road course actually had a pretty good race this year. But I understand why TV markets, it's a bigger brand, all of that stuff. I understand why they went back to the Oval. Again, are fans actually going to watch it show up? We'll have to wait and see. Then you got the 2-week Olympic break, and I know Eric Geekstead mentioned this, that he wished that the Olympic break, that he wished that the Brickyard 400 came after the Olympic break. I agree with that because you could have used those 2 weeks of the Olympics to build up to the anticipation of the Brickyard 400. Now it feels like NBC is kind of trying to use the Brickyard 400 to build up the Olympics. But the Brickyard 400 is not a big event. It's not that great. It's not a big event. It went away for 3 years. So you're going to try to make the return of an event that you hope is going to be successful to market the Olympics. In that way, that just makes no sense to me. Then they go into Richmond, and then Michigan, and then Daytona. So Daytona is the second to final race of the season now and not the regular season finale. Now, I mentioned this before. Again, this is due to the Olympic shuffle. 2 weeks off for the Cup Series due to the Olympic break. That is why Daytona is the second and final race of the regular season. I anticipate that it's going to be the regular season finale come 2025. Now, I've seen some comments out there, especially with some of my own friends, who have said that if Daytona is not the regular season finale anymore, why don't we go back to the 4th of July weekend? Folks, Daytona themselves don't want it as the regular season finale. If the city themselves have publicly come out and say, we do not want our race on this date, why are we going to push so hard to push it on that date? Daytona, before they moved it to the regular season finale, really only had 2 days. In NASCAR wise, where really only had a couple, the regular season finale for Daytona worked better for them than it did the 4th of July. So why would we change that? Again, I understand why we're changing that for this one, for this schedule. But why go back to the 4th of July when it clearly, A, the city doesn't want it, and B, you would just be playing with the fans' emotions at that point. Be like, yeah, it's back to the 4th of July. And then next year we're back to the regular season finale. Nothing. No. I'm going to say no. So Darlington becomes the regular season finale now. Again, I kind of wish it was the playoff opener, but NASCAR's even come out and said that its Labor Day slot is too important for them to move it. I respect that. And again, I anticipate Darlington will be the season opener once again come 2025. So I'm not too worried about that. Same way with Daytona. Now let's move on to the playoffs. So the playoffs are kicking off with Atlanta Motor Speedway. Here's my next grievance with the schedule. And this isn't just a personal thing. Do I hate that there's 2 super speedways on the playoffs now with Talladega? Not really. I understand where people might be coming from, saying that now there's more luck and less skill involved in winning a championship. I disagree. Plate racing is a completely different animal than, racing at 1.5 miles for a short track. It takes a different skill set, a different mentality to get up to the front and win these races. You only have that once in the playoffs. The fact that you have it now twice, it kind of forces you to be even more so on your game and really test your skill set even more so as an overall driver, not just throughout the entire season, but for the playoffs. So as for that sense, I like it. My personal reason why I don't like it, and I even said this should have happened this year. Why is Atlanta not the 4th of July race? I've been clamoring this for the past 2 years. Fans have nonstop been asking for Daytona to come back to the 4th of July weekend. It's not going to happen. I just mentioned that already. So why not give it to Atlanta? You just go a couple hours north. You make it a night race, and it's a plate race. It'd be almost like you never left Daytona. It would be perfect. Instead, we go to the Chicago Street Course, which doesn't feel like a 4th of July weekend at all. In fact, it feels like NASCAR kind of just given up on the 4th of July weekend as a whole. If you move Atlanta there, you get it back. To me, it makes perfect sense to move Atlanta to the 4th of July weekend and not a track like Chicago. Chicago's always going to stand on its own. You move Atlanta, one of the Atlanta races, to the 4th of July, you can make that race stand on its own. And you could theoretically add another high market or high key event. Okay, that's just a personal reason for mine. That's just a personal reason. Atlanta opening the playoffs, I don't hate it. Again, I already mentioned it before. I think it's good. I think it adds more diversity to the playoffs. And speaking of diversity to the playoffs, Watkins Glen is now the second race of the round of 16. I like this. I like having more road courses into the playoff schedule. Again, you know what's interesting? The schedule as a whole, I feel, has gotten less diverse, but the playoffs have gotten more diverse. And I like that. I like that drivers are now having needed to be tested in a more different sense. It's not just as simple as you better master 80% mile and a halves and 20% short track super speedway road courses. No, now the playoffs are a little more balanced. You got 2 super speedways, 2 road courses, 2 short tracks, and you still got 3 mile and a halves, and you got the kind of oddball at Phoenix. That sounds pretty balanced to me. It's a perfectly balanced playoff schedule. You have to be a master at every single type of track throughout the entirety of the playoffs and not just one race once in a while. And I think theoretically that could take away the wild card aspect of a track like Talladega or a track like the Roval, because you have to, like I said, master those skills. And I think adding Atlanta and Watkins Glen just proves that. So again, maybe I'm in the minority, but I personally have no problem with Atlanta and Watkins Glen being on the schedule for the playoffs. I personally like it. People might say it might bring more chaos. I disagree. I think it's going to bring out more as to who the best overall driver is throughout the year, and not just who can win all the mile and a halves. That's just my opinion, though. Honestly, the rest of the playoffs is pretty much unchanged. You got Bristol, round of 16 finale. Kansas opens up the round of 12 now, but other than that, everything is pretty much the same. Talladega, the Roval, Las Vegas, my home track, the Homestead, Martinsville, and then Phoenix is once again the championship finale. So that's the schedule as a whole. For the most part, not a lot of changes. A couple dates have shuffled around here and there, mostly due to the Olympics, probably also due to some reasons from NASCAR, but overall, I like it. I think it's an all right schedule. Do I like it more than this year's schedule? No. I like that we have a dirt race. I like that there's a little more road courses onto the schedule. I think the schedule is more diverse, talking about this year's schedule, than last year's schedule, than next year's schedule. But I don't think it's a bad schedule. Again, my main grievances are due to the placements of these races more so than the tracks themselves. And, some of the TV network issues, things of that nature. But overall, I like it. If I had to rate it out of 10, I'd probably give it about an 8. 8 out of 10. Very good schedule. I don't have any track complaints besides Texas. That's a given. But other than that, I think it's a really good schedule. And I'm excited for next season. Now that we finally have this schedule out for the 2024 season. So those are my thoughts on the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. What did you guys think of my opinion on the schedule? What do you think of the schedule as a whole? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe as well to the Motorsport Ministry. If you guys want to follow me on all my social medias, you can follow me on Twitter or X and TikTok at Motor Minister. And if you want to listen to the audio-only versions of the Motorsport Ministry, you can follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Amazon Music, iHeart Radio, all major podcasting platforms. I have those links into my description as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.